Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Ashes and Lies. The sterile hospital room smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams. Wilbert Duke's eyes opened slowly, his throat raw from smoke inhalation, bandages covering the burns on his arms and chest. For 43 years, he had built an empire in construction, turning a small contracting business into a multi-million-dollar enterprise through sheer determination and an iron will that never bent to anyone. The door creaked open, and Bonita Duke entered, her face streaked with tears that seemed too perfectly timed. At 38, she still possessed the beauty that had first caught his attention 15 years ago, blonde hair, green eyes, and a smile that could disarm anyone. But today, that smile was nowhere to be found. "Wilbert," she whispered, rushing to his bedside. "Thank God you're awake." He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a rasp. "Emma, where's Emma?" Bonita's face crumpled, and she gripped his hand tightly. "Our daughter didn't make it. You're the only one who survived." The tears flowed freely now, and Wilbert felt his world collapse. 12-year-old Emma, with her father's dark eyes and stubborn streak, his pride and joy, gone. The memories came flooding back in fragments. The smell of gasoline, the crackling of flames, Emma's screams echoing through the house. He had tried to reach her room, but the smoke had overwhelmed him in the hallway. "How?" he managed to croak out. "The fire department said it started in the garage. Maybe an electrical fault with your equipment." Bonita's voice trembled, but something in her eyes didn't match her grief. "I was at my sister Julie's house for dinner. I came home to everything burning." Wilbert knew every inch of his garage, every tool, every wire. He was meticulous about maintenance, had to be in his line of work. But the pain medication clouded his thoughts, and grief overwhelmed his usual sharp instincts. "I need some air," Bonita said, squeezing his hand once more. "The insurance investigator wants to talk to us tomorrow. Rest now." After she left, Wilbert stared at the ceiling, his mind racing despite the medication. 15 years of marriage, and he had given Bonita everything. A mansion in the hills, luxury cars, jewelry that cost more than most people's homes. He had built his fortune through calculated risks and ruthless business decisions, eliminating competitors who tried to undercut him, buying out smaller companies, and never showing mercy to those who crossed him. But now, lying in this hospital bed, having lost his daughter, he felt more vulnerable than he had since his childhood in the rough neighborhoods of Detroit. His father had abandoned them when he was 10, leaving him to protect his mother from creditors and drunken boyfriends. That experience had forged him into a man who trusted no one completely and forgave nothing. The door opened again, and a police officer stepped inside. Officer Gary Martin was a tall, weathered man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Duke, I'm sorry for your loss," Martin said quietly, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "I know this is difficult, but I have a few questions about the night of the fire." Wilbert nodded weakly. "Can you tell me what you remember?" "I was in my study, working on plans for a new development project. Around 10:30, I smelled something burning." Wilbert closed his eyes, forcing himself to recall. "I went to investigate and found smoke coming from the garage. The flames spread so fast, unnaturally fast." Officer Martin leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Mr. Duke, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. We found traces of accelerant throughout the house, gasoline, strategically placed to ensure maximum damage and rapid spread." The words hit Wilbert like a physical blow. "You're saying someone did this intentionally?" "I'm saying someone wanted that house to burn completely, with no survivors." Martin's eyes were grim. "The fire was meant to kill you, Mr. Duke. Your daughter was collateral damage." Chapter 2. The Truth Unveiled. The revelation shattered whatever remained of Wilbert's world, but it also awakened something primal within him. The same cold fury that had driven him to destroy business rivals who tried to steal his contracts or spread lies about his company. "Do you have any idea who would want you dead?" Officer Martin asked. Wilbert's mind immediately went to his business competitors, former employees he'd fired for incompetence or theft, contractors he'd blacklisted for shoddy work. But something nagged at him about Bonita's reaction, her perfectly timed tears, the way she'd avoided his eyes when explaining where she'd been. "I've made enemies in business," he admitted. "But this feels personal." Martin nodded. "We're investigating all possibilities. But there's something else you should know. Your wife's sister Julie Neal says Bonita wasn't with her that night. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Wilbert's hands clenched into fists despite the pain from his burns. In business, he had learned to read people, to spot lies and deception. The signs had been there with Bonita. The late nights she claimed were book club meetings, the sudden interest in her appearance, the way she'd grown distant over the past 6 months. Where was she? Wilbert asked, his voice deadly quiet. That's what we're trying to determine. Julie says she invited Bonita for dinner, but your wife never showed up. Julie tried calling her several times that evening, but got no answer. Wilbert closed his eyes, pieces of a darker puzzle beginning to form. Has she been questioned about this discrepancy? Not yet. We wanted to speak with you first. Martin leaned back in his chair. Mr. Duke, in cases like this, we have to look at everyone close to the victim. Insurance payouts, inheritance, personal relationships, they're all factors. How much would she get if I die? The question tasted bitter in his mouth. According to your insurance company, $5 million in life insurance, plus whatever assets transfer to her as your wife. Your construction company alone is worth $8 million. 13 million reasons for his wife to want him dead. The number burned in his mind worse than the flames that had consumed his home and daughter. I want to see the fire investigation report, Wilbert said. That's evidence in an ongoing investigation. Officer Martin. Wilbert's voice carried the authority that had made him millions and crushed his competitors. Someone murdered my 12-year-old daughter and tried to murder me. I have resources, connections, and the motivation to find out who did this. You can either work with me, or I can conduct my own investigation. Martin studied him for a long moment. What kind of resources? I own the largest construction company in 3 states. I have private investigators on retainer, security specialists, and enough political connections to make your life very easy or very difficult. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. After a moment of consideration, Martin reached into his briefcase. The full report isn't ready, but here's what we have so far. He handed Wilbert several photographs and documents. The accelerant was poured in specific patterns: your study, the main staircase, the garage, and Emma's room. The last detail hit Wilbert like a sledgehammer. They hadn't just tried to kill him. They had deliberately targeted his daughter's room to ensure she couldn't escape. Whoever did this knew the layout of your house intimately, Martin continued. They knew which rooms you'd be in, where Emma slept, and exactly how to trap both of you. Wilbert stared at the photographs, his businessman's mind analyzing the evidence with cold precision. The pattern was too perfect, too calculated. This wasn't random arson. It was an execution plan. I need you to do something for me, Wilbert said. Don't let Bonita know about these findings yet. Tell her the investigation is ongoing, but don't mention the accelerant or Julie's statement. Why? Because if my wife is involved in murdering my daughter, I want her to feel safe enough to make a mistake. The words came out with the same tone he'd used to fire executives who'd betrayed his trust, final and unforgiving. Martin nodded slowly. What are you planning? Justice, Wilbert replied. The kind that doesn't require a courtroom. Chapter 3, The Web of Deceit. 3 days later, Wilbert was released from the hospital against his doctor's recommendations. The burns on his arms and chest were still healing, but he had work to do. He checked into a suite at the Grand Windsor Hotel downtown, telling Bonita he needed space to grieve and handle the insurance matters. The hotel suite became his war room. He had his assistant Mac Winters bring him files, laptops, and everything he needed to conduct business remotely. Mac was a loyal soldier who had worked for Wilbert for 8 years, handling the delicate matters that required discretion. I need you to hire Sanford Fuentes, Wilbert told Mac. Fuentes was a private investigator who specialized in marital cases, the kind of man who could find dirt on anyone and disappear when the job was done. What kind of job? Mac asked, though his knowing expression suggested he already suspected. Full surveillance on my wife. Phone records, financial transactions, where she goes, who she sees. I want to know everything about the last 6 months of her life. Mac nodded. Anything else? Contact Henry West at the Fire Investigation Unit. Tell him I'm offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of whoever killed Emma. While Mac made the arrangements, Wilbert reviewed his personal finances with the cold efficiency that had made him wealthy. He discovered several troubling discrepancies. Cash withdrawals from their joint account that Bonita had never mentioned, credit card charges at expensive restaurants on nights she claimed to be home, and hotel bookings in the city on weekends she said she was visiting friends. The evidence painted a picture of a woman living a double life. But Wilbert needed more than financial records. He needed names, faces, and proof of motive. His phone rang. Bonita's voice was sweet, concerned. "How are you feeling? The house insurance adjuster wants to meet with us tomorrow." "I'm not ready to deal with that yet," Wilbert lied smoothly. "Can you handle it? You know I trust you with these things." "Of course, darling. Whatever you need." The endearment made his skin crawl. "Have you given any thought to where we'll live? We could buy something new, start fresh." Start fresh. As if Emma's death was just an inconvenience to be overcome. "We'll talk about it when I'm stronger," he said. "I love you. I love you too." The words were poison in both their mouths. 2 hours later, Sanford Fuentes knocked on his hotel room door. The private investigator was a small, unassuming man who looked like an accountant, but his reputation for uncovering secrets was legendary. Mac explained the basics, Fuentes said, settling into a chair across from Wilbert. "You suspect your wife of involvement in the arson?" "I suspect everyone until proven otherwise. But yes, the evidence is pointing toward Bonita." Fuentes opened a tablet and pulled up several photographs. "I took the liberty of doing some preliminary work. Your wife has been seeing this man for approximately 4 months. He showed Wilbert a picture of Bonita entering a downtown apartment building with a tall, dark-haired man. "Who is he?" "Brenton Livingston, 35, works as a financial advisor at Sterling Investments. Divorced, no children, drives a BMW he can't afford, and has gambling debts with some very unfriendly people." Wilbert studied the man's face, memorizing every feature. Brenton had the kind of polished good looks that appealed to women like Bonita, expensive suits, perfect hair, and the false confidence of a man trying to live beyond his means. How deep are his debts? Deep enough to kill for. He owes $200,000 to a loan shark named Gordon Beck, and Beck's not known for his patience. Livingston's been behind on payments for 3 months. The motive crystallized with perfect clarity. Bonita had found herself a lover who needed money, and together they had decided Wilbert was worth more dead than alive. "I need everything on both of them," Wilbert said. "Bank records, phone calls, hotel receipts, credit card statements. I want to know every move they've made in the past 6 months. That kind of comprehensive surveillance isn't cheap. Money isn't an issue." Wilbert pulled out a checkbook and wrote a figure that made even the experienced investigator's eyes widen. "There's more where that came from if you get me what I need to destroy them." Fuentes pocketed the check. "What exactly are you planning to do with this information?" "That depends on what we find. But I can promise you this. They're going to pay for Emma's death in ways that will make them beg for prison." As Fuentes left, Wilbert stood at the hotel window, looking out over the city he had helped build with his construction projects. Somewhere out there, his wife and her lover thought they had gotten away with murder. They had no idea they were dealing with a man who had spent his entire life turning weakness into strength and enemies into cautionary tales. Emma's death would not go unpunished, and when Wilbert Duke decided someone needed to pay, he collected with interest. Chapter 4: Gathering the Storm. Over the next week, Sanford Fuentes proved why he commanded premium fees. The evidence poured in like pieces of a damning puzzle. Hotel security footage showing Bonita and Brenton together, bank records revealing cash transfers, and phone transcripts that painted a picture of 2 people planning a new life together, one that required Wilbert's death. The most damning piece came from a recording device Fuentes had planted in Brenton's apartment. Wilbert listened to his wife's voice with cold fury. The fire investigator said it could take months to determine the cause. Wilbert's still too grief-stricken to ask too many questions. "We just need to be patient." Brenton's voice followed. "I can't wait months, Bonita. Beck's threatening to break my legs. We need that insurance money now. Then we accelerate the timeline. I'll convince Wilbert to increase his life insurance policy while he's vulnerable. Then we arrange an accident." They were planning to kill him again. Wilbert turned off the recording and called Mac Winters. "I need you to arrange a meeting with Nicholas Anderson at the bank. Tell him I want to discuss some unusual financial arrangements, and that confidentiality is paramount." Anderson was the senior vice president who handled Wilbert's business accounts, a man who understood that discretion was often more valuable than interest rates. "What kind of arrangements?" Mac asked. The kind that will give Bonita and her lover exactly what they want, in ways they'll regret forever. That afternoon, Wilbert met with Anderson in a private conference room at the bank. The vice president was a thin, nervous man who had built his career on managing the complicated financial needs of wealthy clients with complex problems. "I need to restructure my assets," Wilbert explained. "Create what appears to be a vulnerable position that would make it attractive for someone to kill me for insurance money." Anderson's face paled. "Mr. Duke, I'm not sure I understand. My wife is planning to murder me for my life insurance. I want her to think she's succeeding right up until the moment I destroy her." Wilbert leaned forward, his voice deadly serious. "Can you help me create that illusion?" After a long moment, Anderson nodded. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to establish a trust that appears to leave everything to Bonita if I die, but actually transfers all assets to a foundation I control. Make it complex enough that she won't understand the fine print until it's too late." "That's legally questionable. So is murdering someone's daughter." Wilbert's tone made it clear the conversation was over. "Draw up the papers." Meanwhile, Wilbert began his psychological campaign against Brenton Livingston. He used his construction company's connections to spread word that Brenton was being investigated for financial misconduct by his employer. Anonymous tips reached Sterling Investments about their advisors' gambling debts and connections to loan sharks. Within days, Brenton was suspended pending an internal investigation. Desperate and panicked, he began pressuring Bonita to move faster with their plans. Fuentes brought Wilbert recordings of increasingly frantic phone calls. "They're closing in on me at work. We need to do this now." "Calm down, Brenton. Wilbert's already talking about updating his insurance policies. Just give me a few more days." "I don't have days. Beck's people came to my apartment last night. They made it clear what happens if I don't pay soon." Wilbert smiled coldly as he listened. Fear made people sloppy, and sloppy people made mistakes. His next move was even more calculated. He arranged for Gordon Beck to receive an anonymous tip about Brenton's plan to come into money soon, money that would pay off his debts with interest. But he also made sure Beck understood that this windfall depended on Brenton remaining alive and functional. The result was exactly what Wilbert anticipated. Beck's enforcers began watching Brenton closely, ensuring he couldn't disappear or do anything foolish before his inheritance came through. This added pressure made Brenton even more desperate and reckless. "You're playing a dangerous game," Mac observed during one of their evening meetings. "What if they actually try to kill you before you can stop them?" Wilbert touched the .45 caliber pistol he now carried concealed at all times. "Let them try. I've been handling dangerous people my entire career. The difference is that this time, it's personal." He had spent weeks studying every detail of their plan, their weaknesses, and their fears. Now it was time to turn the tables and show them what a real predator could do when someone threatened his family. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it at the perfect moment, when they were committed, vulnerable, and completely at his mercy. Chapter 5, The Bait. Wilbert's performance as the grieving, vulnerable widower was Academy Award worthy. He met with Bonita at expensive restaurants, appearing fragile and dependent, discussing their future together, while she played the supportive wife still deep in mourning for Emma. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told her over dinner at Le Bernardin, her favorite restaurant. "About starting fresh. Maybe you're right. Maybe we need to leave this city and all its painful memories behind." Bonita reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her green eyes bright with what looked like sympathy but was actually anticipation. "Where would we go?" "I was thinking about that house we looked at in Switzerland 2 years ago, the one overlooking Lake Geneva." He paused, as if the memory was painful. "Emma loved that place." "It would be expensive," Bonita said carefully. "Money isn't an issue. I've been meeting with Anderson about restructuring our finances, making sure you're taken care of if anything happens to me." Wilbert let his voice crack slightly. "Losing Emma made me realize how fragile life is." That evening, hidden cameras captured Bonita on the phone with Brenton, her voice breathless with excitement. "He's updating his life insurance, increasing it to $10 million. And he's been talking about moving to Switzerland, somewhere remote and isolated." Brenton's response was immediate. "Perfect. An accident in the mountains would be much easier to arrange than something in the city." The next day, Wilbert met with Ricky Braun, a security specialist who had worked with his construction company on several high-risk projects. Braun was an ex-military man who understood that sometimes problems required permanent solutions. I need protection, Wilbert explained. But not the obvious kind. I want my enemies to think I'm vulnerable while ensuring they can't actually harm me. Braun studied the photographs and surveillance reports Wilbert provided. Your wife and her boyfriend aren't professionals. They're desperate amateurs, which actually makes them more dangerous. They're unpredictable. Can you handle them? The question is how permanently you want them handled. Wilbert met Braun's steady gaze. They murdered my 12-year-old daughter. How permanent do you think I want it? Understood. When do you want to move? They're planning something for our trip to Switzerland. I want you and your team in position before we leave. Meanwhile, Wilbert continued building his financial trap. The revised trust documents looked perfect to a casual observer. Bonita would inherit everything if he died. But buried deep in the legal language were clauses that would void the trust if she was found to be involved in his death, transferring everything instead to a foundation dedicated to Emma's memory. Even more deviously, Wilbert had structured the insurance policies to pay out immediately upon his death, but with a provision that any beneficiary found guilty of murder would forfeit their claim. The money would then go to the Emma Duke Foundation for Children's Fire Safety, a charity that existed solely to ensure Bonita would never see a penny of his money. 2 days before their planned departure to Switzerland, Fuentes brought Wilbert the final piece of the puzzle, a recording of Bonita and Brenton finalizing their murder plan. The hiking trail above Interlaken, Bonita's voice was cold and calculating. He loves that route. We hiked it 3 years ago. There's a section where the path runs along a cliff edge. A tragic fall during a morning hike. What about evidence? Brenton asked. I'll say he slipped on loose rocks. I tried to grab him, but couldn't hold on. The grief-stricken widow, traumatized by losing both her husband and daughter within months. And then, we wait a reasonable period for the insurance to pay out, then gradually move to Europe. Start our new life with $10 million and no one to answer to. Listening to his wife plan his murder with such casual cruelty crystallized something dark and final in Wilbert's soul. Any lingering doubts about his planned revenge vanished. They had killed Emma and were planning to kill him, not in passion or desperation, but with cold, calculated greed. They deserved what was coming. Chapter 6. The Spider's Web. The flight to Switzerland was surreal. Bonita played the devoted wife perfectly, holding his hand during turbulence, discussing their plans for healing and recovery, even bringing up the possibility of eventually adopting another child when the time was right. Wilbert watched her performance with detached fascination. She had always been a skilled actress. It was one of the qualities that had attracted him initially. But now he saw it for what it truly was, the manipulative skill of a predator who had been playing him for years. Brenton had flown separately, ostensibly on business for a client, but actually to establish his presence in Switzerland independently of their trip. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. He would accidentally encounter them on the hiking trail, join them for the trek, and be there to witness Wilbert's tragic accident. They checked into the Grand Hotel Victoria Jungfrau in Interlaken, the same luxury hotel where they had stayed during their previous visit. Wilbert made sure to tip generously, be memorable to the staff, and establish a pattern of behavior that would support Bonita's eventual story about his state of mind. The concierge recommended the harder Culm Trail for tomorrow morning. Bonita mentioned over dinner, her voice casual. He said it's particularly beautiful this time of year. That sounds perfect, Wilbert agreed. I need the exercise and fresh air. This whole ordeal has left me feeling so weak. What Bonita didn't know was that Ricky Braun and his team had been in Switzerland for 3 days, positioned along every possible hiking route, armed with high-powered rifles and a detailed plan for what would happen when she and Brenton revealed their true intentions. That night, as Bonita slept beside him in their hotel suite, Wilbert lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would end a chapter of his life that had lasted 15 years. In 24 hours, the woman who had shared his bed, borne witness to his success, and murdered his daughter would face justice. But it wouldn't be the quick, clean death she had planned for him. Wilbert had learned long ago that the most effective punishment was often psychological, breaking someone's spirit before ending their life. His phone buzzed silently. A text from Fuentes. Brenton checked into the Alpina Hotel an hour ago. He's been drinking heavily at the bar, nervous about tomorrow. Good. Nervous people made mistakes, and Wilbert was counting on both of them being off their game when the moment came. At dawn, Bonita woke with theatrical enthusiasm for their hiking plans. She packed a picnic lunch, fussed over Wilbert's jacket and boots, and chattered excitedly about the therapeutic value of mountain air. The Harderkolm Trail was a moderate hike that wound through pine forest before opening onto dramatic views of the Jungfrau Massif. The section where they planned to kill him was about 2 hours from the trailhead, a narrow path carved into a cliff face with a 200-foot drop to the valley below. As they began their hike, Wilbert spotted Ricky Braun positioned as a fellow hiker about 50 yards behind them. 2 more team members were hidden among the trees near their destination, and a 4th was stationed at the cliff overlook with a clear shooting position. "It's so beautiful here," Bonita said, stopping to take photos. "Emma would have loved this place." The casual mention of their dead daughter almost broke Wilbert's careful control. His hand tightened around the walking stick he carried, a heavy oak staff that could serve as a weapon if necessary. An hour into the hike, they encountered Brenton coming from the opposite direction, his appearance perfectly timed and completely coincidental. "Wilbert, Bonita, what an amazing surprise." His acting was even worse than Bonita's, but Wilbert played along with their charade. "Brenton, what are you doing here? Client meeting in Zurich fell through, so I decided to do some hiking. Mind if I join you?" And there it was, the trap closing around them as they walked deeper into the mountains, completely unaware that they were the prey, not the predators. The final act was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Mountain's Justice. The cliff section of the trail was exactly as Wilbert remembered, a narrow ledge carved into the rock face with safety barriers that had deteriorated over the years. Far below, the valley floor stretched out in a patchwork of green fields and tiny villages. Bonita and Brenton had been exchanging meaningful glances for the past hour, their nervous energy building as they approached the killing ground they had chosen. Wilbert could see them positioning themselves, Bonita behind him on the narrow trail, Brenton ahead, ready to grab him when she pushed. "Let's stop here for the picnic," Bonita suggested as they reached a small widening in the path. "The view is incredible." Wilbert noticed how she guided him to the edge, how Brenton positioned himself to block any retreat back down the trail. They thought they were minutes away from making themselves rich. "You know," Wilbert said conversationally as he opened the picnic basket, "I've been thinking a lot about trust lately. About how you can share your life with someone for 15 years and never really know who they are." Something in his tone made Bonita glance at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know about you and Brenton. I know about your plans. And I know you both killed my daughter." The transformation was immediate and complete. Bonita's mask of loving concern vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Brenton dropped any pretense of friendliness, his hand moving toward the knife concealed in his jacket. "How long have you known?" Bonita asked. "Since the night Officer Gary Martin told me the fire was arson. Since I discovered your sister Julie never saw you that evening. Since I found out about Brenton's gambling debts and your joint bank account." Brenton pulled the knife, a 6-inch hunting blade that gleamed in the mountain sunlight. "It doesn't matter what you know. You're about to have a tragic accident." "Am I?" Wilbert smiled, and something in that expression made both of them hesitate. "You murdered my daughter, you greedy bastards. You think I came up here unprepared." A rifle shot echoed across the valley. Brenton's knife spun out of his hand as blood sprayed from his wrist. He screamed and stumbled backward, clutching the ruined appendage. "What?" Bonita spun around, looking for the source of the shot. "Did you really think I was stupid enough to put myself at your mercy?" Wilbert's voice was cold as the mountain air. "I've spent weeks setting this up. Every conversation, every plan, every move you've made, I've known about it." Another shot, this one shattering the rock inches from Bonita's feet. She scrambled away from the edge, her face pale with terror. "The insurance money you're so eager to collect? The trust fund you think makes you rich? They're structured to void completely if you're involved in my death. You get nothing. Every penny goes to Emma's Memorial Foundation. You can't prove we killed her." Bonita's voice cracked with desperation. "I don't have to prove anything in court." Wilbert stood, and for the first time, they saw him as he truly was, not a grieving victim, but a predator who had built an empire by destroying anyone who crossed him. "Ricky." Braun emerged from the trees, rifle in hand, his expression professionally neutral. 2 more armed men appeared from behind rock formations, creating a perimeter around the cliff. You have a choice, Wilbert continued. You can confess to Emma's murder and throw yourselves on the mercy of the Swiss authorities. Or I can let my men handle this the way we handle problems in the construction business, permanently and quietly. Brenton, still bleeding from his shattered wrist, looked wildly between the armed men. You can't murder us. This is insane. Murder? Wilbert's laugh was without humor. You mean like when you poured gasoline throughout my house and lit it while my daughter slept in her room? That kind of murder. She was supposed to be at her friend's house. Bonita screamed. Emma was supposed to be at a sleepover. The admission hung in the mountain air like a death sentence. But she came home early because she forgot her science project, Wilbert said quietly. So when you lit that fire, you knew you were burning a 12-year-old girl alive. He turned to Braun. They've confessed. Emma's death was intentional murder, and they were planning to kill me today for insurance money. Braun nodded and raised his rifle. Wait. Brenton fell to his knees. We'll confess. We'll tell the police everything. Too late for that, Wilbert replied. You see, there's something else you don't know about me. In 30 years of business, I've never, not once, forgiven anyone who betrayed me. Partners who tried to steal my contracts disappeared. Employees who embezzled money had accidents. Competitors who spread lies about my company found themselves bankrupt. He stepped closer to his terrified wife. But this isn't business, Bonita. You killed my daughter. You murdered the only thing in this world I loved more than money or power. Did you really think I would let you live? Chapter 8. Blood and Retribution. The mountain wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and the sound of Bonita's sobbing. She had collapsed to her knees beside Brenton, both of them now facing the reality that their carefully planned murder had become their own execution. Please, Bonita whispered. I know what we did was wrong, but wrong. Wilbert's voice cut through her plea like a blade. Wrong is cheating on your taxes. Wrong is cutting in line at the grocery store. You burned my daughter alive for money. That's not wrong. That's evil. He nodded to Braun, who began moving closer to the two would-be killers. Wilbert, please. Brenton tried one last desperate gambit. The gambling debts, they weren't just threats. Gordon Beck's people will kill me if I don't pay. I was desperate. People do desperate things when they're cornered. You're right, Wilbert agreed. They do. For instance, when someone murders my daughter, I do desperate things like this. What happened next would haunt both Bonita and Brenton in their final moments. Wilbert didn't simply order their execution. He made it personal, slow, and infinitely more terrifying than they had planned for him. Braun, disable them, but keep them conscious. I want them to understand exactly what's happening and why. The security specialist's next shots were precisely placed, one through each of Brenton's ankles, dropping him permanently to the ground. Bonita tried to run, but there was nowhere to go on the narrow cliff path. A bullet through her knee sent her sprawling. You wanted my money so badly, Wilbert said, standing over his maimed wife. Let me tell you what's really going to happen to it. Every dollar I made during our marriage, every business deal, every investment, every contract, it's all going to the Emma Duke Foundation. Your name will be attached to it as the woman who murdered the daughter the foundation honors. He pulled out a legal document and showed it to her. I've also arranged for your affair and the murder plot to become very public. The insurance company will sue you for fraud. The district attorney will posthumously charge you with Emma's murder. Your family will know exactly what kind of person you really were. Bonita's face was white with pain and terror. You said posthumously. What do you mean posthumously? I mean you're not leaving this mountain alive. Neither of you. Brenton, bleeding heavily from his wounds, made one last attempt at bargaining. The loan sharks, they know I'm here. If I don't come back, they'll investigate. No, they won't, Wilbert said calmly. Because I paid off your debt yesterday. $200,000, transferred directly to Gordon Beck's account. I told him you'd had a change of fortune and wanted to clear your obligations. The hopelessness in Brenton's eyes was exactly what Wilbert had wanted to see. But here's the beautiful part, Wilbert continued. I paid your debt using money from your own life insurance policy. The one your ex-wife Patricia still pays premiums on, hoping you might reconcile someday. When your body is found, she'll collect $50,000. The rest of the death benefit is going to, you guessed it, Emma's foundation. Even facing death, the financial irony wasn't lost on Brenton. He had killed for money, and money would profit from his death, just not in the way he'd intended. Bonita was trying to crawl toward the cliff edge. Whether to escape or end her suffering quickly, Wilbert couldn't tell. "I want you to know," he said, kneeling beside her, "that Emma's last words were, 'Daddy, help me.' She was calling for me when the flames reached her room. She died believing I had abandoned her." Bonita's sobs became screams of anguish. "But I didn't abandon her," Wilbert continued relentlessly. "I'm here, on this mountain, making sure the people who killed her pay for what they did. This is me keeping my promise to my daughter." He stood and looked at Braun. "Make it look like a hiking accident. Murder-suicide, maybe." Brenton killed Bonita in a fit of rage, then threw himself off the cliff. "Make sure the Swiss police find evidence of their affair and financial troubles." "What about the confession recording?" Braun asked, holding up a small device that had captured everything. "Anonymous tip to the American authorities. Let them reopen Emma's case posthumously and clear my name of any suspicion." As Braun and his men began their grisly work, Wilbert walked to the cliff edge and looked out over the valley. Somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing in one of the small villages below. It was a peaceful sound, at odds with the violence occurring on the mountain trail. His phone buzzed. A text message from Mac Winters. "Swiss bank confirms all transfers completed. Foundation is fully funded and operational." Wilbert typed back, "Good. Make sure Emma's name is on the memorial plaque in gold letters." Behind him, the sounds of struggle ended abruptly. Braun approached and nodded once. Professional confirmation that the job was complete. "Clean?" Wilbert asked. "Perfect accident scene. The evidence will support murder-suicide. Your alibi is solid. Hotel security shows you never left the premises this morning." That was another detail Wilbert had arranged. While Bonita thought they were hiking together, he had actually sent a body double, one of Braun's men who resembled him from a distance, while he remained safely at the hotel, visible to multiple witnesses. The plan had worked flawlessly from start to finish. Chapter 9, Phoenix Rising. 6 months later, Wilbert Duke stood in the reception hall of the newly opened Emma Duke Children's Safety Center in downtown Detroit. The facility was a monument to his daughter's memory, a place where children could learn fire safety, where burn victims could receive free treatment, and where Emma's name would live on in the lives she saved. The Swiss investigation had concluded exactly as planned. Brenton Livingston and Bonita Duke had been found dead on the Hardercombe Trail, victims of what appeared to be a murder-suicide motivated by financial desperation and a love affair gone wrong. The recording of their confession had mysteriously appeared in the evidence room of the Detroit Police Department, leading to the posthumous closure of Emma's murder case. Officer Gary Martin attended the Memorial Center's opening ceremony, seeking out Wilbert during the reception. "Justice has a way of working itself out," Martin said quietly, studying Wilbert's face. "Funny how those two ended up dead on a mountain in Switzerland just when we were getting close to proving their guilt." "Tragic coincidence," Wilbert replied smoothly. "I'm just grateful the truth about Emma's death finally came to light." Martin nodded slowly. "I'm sure you are. For what it's worth, I think Emma would be proud of what you've built here." "She would," Wilbert agreed. "She always wanted to help other kids." The insurance companies had initially resisted paying the claims, but the Swiss police investigation and the confession recording made their legal position untenable. The $10 million life insurance policy, along with Bonita's smaller policy, had all been donated to the Emma Duke Foundation as planned. Mac Winters approached with a folder of documents. "The construction company's quarterly reports," he said. "Profits are up 30% since you took full control." It was true. Without the drain of Bonita's spending, and with his newfound focus channeled into expanding the business, Duke Construction had grown larger and more profitable than ever. Wilbert had thrown himself into work with the same ruthless efficiency he'd applied to his revenge. "Any word from Gordon Beck about Brenton's debt payment?" Wilbert asked. Max smiled. "He sent a fruit basket and a note saying he was sorry for our loss." Professional courtesy from one businessman to another. Even the loan shark had recognized and respected the completeness of Wilbert's victory. As the reception wound down, Wilbert found himself alone in the center's memorial room, standing before a large photograph of Emma laughing on a playground. She had been 12 years old, full of life and potential, stolen from the world by two people who valued money more than human life. "I kept my promise, baby girl," he whispered to the photograph. "They paid for what they did to you." His phone buzzed. A text from Ricky Braun, who was now running security for Duke Construction full-time. New client wants to meet. Says he has a problem that needs our special kind of solution. Wilbert smiled coldly. Word was spreading in certain circles that Wilbert Duke was a man who solved problems permanently and quietly. His construction company had become more than a business. It was becoming a resource for people who needed justice when the legal system couldn't provide it. He typed back, set up the meeting. Same rates as last time. The Emma Duke Foundation would need continued funding, and there were always people in the world who deserved the same justice he had delivered to his wife and her lover. As he left the memorial center, Wilbert reflected on the lessons he had learned from his ordeal. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. Forgiveness was a weakness that endangered everything he cared about. And when someone threatened his family, there were no limits to how far he would go for revenge. The old Wilbert Duke might have relied on courts and law enforcement to deliver justice. But courts could be corrupted, and law enforcement could be incompetent. The only justice he could trust was the kind he delivered himself. Emma was gone, and nothing would bring her back. But her memory lived on in the children who would learn safety because of her foundation, in the burn victims who would heal in her memorial hospital, and in the fear that now surrounded Wilbert's name in the criminal underworld. They had tried to destroy him, but instead they had forged him into something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous than he had ever been. Wilbert Duke had risen from the ashes of his old life like a phoenix, transformed, powerful, and absolutely ruthless toward anyone foolish enough to cross him. The fire that had claimed Emma's life had burned away his capacity for mercy. In its place remained only a man who understood that sometimes justice required getting your hands dirty, and that forgiveness was a luxury the truly powerful couldn't afford. As he drove home to his new penthouse apartment, a fortress of steel and glass that no one could burn down, Wilbert felt something he hadn't experienced since Emma's death: peace. Not the peace of healing or forgiveness, but the cold satisfaction of a predator who had successfully hunted down his prey. The chapter was closed. Justice had been served, and anyone else who threatened what remained of his family would learn that Wilbert Duke was no longer the man who showed mercy to his enemies. He never forgave. He never forgot. And he always collected what was owed.